Hello and welcome to 5-Year Club video number 268. Tonight we will be discussing Antifragility. I just began reading this book, Antifragile, that is by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who was also the author of Black Swan, which was like a 2007 book on how random events can determine the outcomes, like really big outcomes, and we tend to discount the probability of random events or their impact on things because they make us uncomfortable and because we don't know how to deal with them. Anyway, the thesis of his book Antifragile is that antifragile systems are systems which actually benefit from volatility. They benefit from randomness. They benefit from black swan events. And so if we can build anti-fragile systems instead of fragile systems, which get destroyed by black swan events, then we are much better off in the long run. So let's get some definitions out of the way. And, I don't expect to cover this topic in great depth tonight. I expect to give you some definitions to think about and also point out some of the ways that this applies in real life. Antifragility is a property of systems that increase in capability, resilience, or robustness as a result of stressors, shocks, volatility, noise, mistakes, false attacks, or failures. It is a concept developed by Professor Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book Antifragile and in technical papers. As Taleb explains in his book, antifragility is fundamentally different from the concepts of resiliency, i.e. the ability to recover from failure, and robustness, that is, the ability to resist failure. I want to reread that because I think it's an important distinction. As Taleb explains in his book, antifragility is fundamentally different from the concepts of resiliency, which is the ability to recover from failure, and robustness, which is the ability to resist failure. So being antifragile is not the same thing as being able to recover from failure. It's not the same thing as being able to resist failure. The concept has been applied in risk analysis, physics, molecular biology, transportation planning, engineering, aerospace, and computer science. Taleb defines it as follows in a letter to Nature responding to an earlier review of his book in that journal. Simply, antifragility is defined as a convex response to a stressor or source of harm for some range of variation, leading to a positive sensitivity to increase in volatility or variability, stress, dispersion of outcomes, or uncertainty, what is grouped under the designation disorder cluster. Likewise, fragility is defined as a concave sensitivity to stressors, leading to a negative sensitivity to increase in volatility. The relationship between fragility, convexivity, and sensitivity to disorder is mathematical, obtained by theorem, not derived from empirical data mining or some historical narrative. It is a priori. All right. So I'm not going to read any more from Wikipedia because I want to skip to one of these articles. Not this one. Let's go see if it's this one, because the article gives a nice it's this one. It gives a nice visual representation. So when he's talking about concave and convex, he's referring to the graph. So here we have a fragile system, right? And we can see that as variability increases, the fragile system gets worse because it's not able to adapt. Adaptivity is actually an even different concept. Adaptivity is defined as a system where you could predict the range of variations and adjust over time to them to get better. But specifically with randomness, you don't even know the range of variations. So anyway, so this is a fragility graph. And if we want to look at something that's anti-fragile, we can look at this one, which is where you don't do well in situations where everything is the same, where there's not a mix of things going on. Like human muscles, right? If you don't work out your muscles, they just kind of shrivel up and die. But if they are exposed to stress and a variation in nutrients and different movements and things, then the muscles get stronger. They get better. So this is a convex graph, and I guess the other one is concave. So yeah, that is antifragility. It is a system that gets better when random things happen. And I think that this is something that we should think about in our financial lives. We should think about how would we respond to financial stressors and financial randomness, random bad things happening, and random good things happening for that matter. But more so, I think it's this idea of how are we going to design ourselves as a financial system so that we actually get better from financial randomness instead of just being able to handle it. If we're just able to handle it, that's what resilience is. That's what robustness is. That's just being able to keep par even when things are not going very well, or being able to keep par even when random things are happening. But antifragility is actually improving. It's actually hoping for some random things to happen because you're ready for it. You're waiting for it. So yeah, other people have read this book and written some good articles. I looked them up on Google. And is this the one that I liked? I don't think this is the one that I liked. It's just one of the ones that I think I liked this one because it had numbers. Yeah. So the video, but this is actually, sorry. There we go. Okay. So in this author's opinion, or actually he references a guy named Buster Benson apparently, here are some simple core principles taken from the Anti-Fragile book. Stick to simple rules. Why? Because complex systems lead to like unpredictable second order consequences. Build in redundancy and layers, no single point of failure. So kind of by definition, if you have redundancy, if you have multiple backup plans, it's not efficient because these backup plans generally have a cost. But if you don't have multiple layers of redundancy and your first layer fails, that was your only layer, and now you're screwed. And so anti-fragile systems, they have multiple levels of protection. They have backup plans. They have plan A, plan B, plan C. It's not as efficient as a more optimized system, but it is less fragile than a more optimized system. Resist the urge to suppress randomness. Why? Because generally speaking, the suppression of randomness can have second-order consequences which are bad. You can see this in ways where like the U.S. government tries to adjust interest rates up and down very carefully to try and avoid volatility. You know, in this case, it's the volatility of, say, inflation. But in the long run, what that does is it just builds up more risk in the system. And my cat is attacking something behind the speaker. Mari! Ugh. I hate it because I never know if she's attacking a wire or just eating a bug. Let's hope that it's a bug. Oh, she's really going to town. All right. Anyway. So, yeah. Resist the urge to suppress randomness. Make sure that you have your soul in the game. Now, this is a reference to having skin in the game, which is that when people do not have skin in the game, when bankers, for example, don't have their skin in the game, in the risks that they are taking, because they know the taxpayers will bail them out, then they tend to build up lots of risk, and they tend to not take care of problems when they're small, And that makes the bank fragile, because by the time the shit hits the fan, that bank is so leveraged in one direction that it can't recover, because there weren't built-in mechanisms to punish these people before they were able to take such big, irresponsible bets. Experiment and tinker. Take lots of small risks. Avoid risks that, if lost, would wipe you out completely. Don't get consumed by data. I'm not sure what this one means, but from personal experience, I can say that you can definitely get very stuck in numbers and not look up at the rest of life. Keep your options open. Although it's interesting because Dan Ariely actually talks about the cost of keeping your options open, and that we're not very good at computing the cost of keeping our options open. We just like doing it kind of instinctually. Focus more on avoiding things that don't work than trying to find out what does work. This is interesting because it kind of mirrors what Warren Buffett says about that investing is as much about not losing money, is more about not losing money than it is about making money. And respect the old, look for habits and rules that have been around for a long time. This mirrors the Stocks for the Long Run sequel book, which is The Future for Investors. He says basically look for the oldest stocks in the S&P 500 because they're doing something right. In short, stop optimizing for today or tomorrow and start playing the long game. That means being less efficient in the short term but more effective in the long term. It's easy to optimize for today. Simply spend more money than you make or eat food that's food designed in a lab to make you eat more and more. But if you play the long game and you stop optimizing and start thinking ahead to the second order consequences of your decisions. So, I mean, look, it's called the 5-year club, which isn't, the 30-year club, so fair enough. It's not that long of a game. But I am trying to make people think about more than just today, more than just tomorrow. I'm trying to make people think about what is their life going to be like 5 years from now. So all of this is very much in line with the stuff that I've studied for the past few years and the stuff that I've been thinking about for the past few years in personal finance. All right. And do I care about this one? Well, that's nice. And this is a nice, little graph here from The Art of Manliness about the difference between fragility, resilience, and anti-fragility. Anyway, I'm just going to post these articles in the description. Haven't even read them, to be honest. But I don't need this video tonight to be too long. I just wanted to introduce this concept, get you interested in it, maybe go download an Audible version of his book, and spend some time thinking about how the concept of anti-fragility could be applied to your life. Have a fabulous evening.